Okay, I brought in stuff, which you probably can't see on the video. So we're talking about oil systems. So I brought in an oil system. And it all starts with the
oil pump.
Displacement.
Oil pump.
the oil sump.
Oil sump.
You didn't bring in the bottom. The oil's down the bottom. And then it's going to have a pickup tube that's going to suck it up to the accessory case.
Yes.
I just can't guess anything.
I'm gonna stop guessing.
All right, so you guys had there's plug down here.
Yeah.
Okay, some of the Lycomings have a pickup tube that bolts here that goes down, and some of them, this is blanked off or not even there, and it comes through the, there's a passage in the oil sump, which I like better. So, all right, so pickup tubes, you got to make sure that you have a pickup tube on here, and there's a gasket here, and technically there's special washers here, and they're copper washers that crush here and seal that. So some of our engines you have to have a little plate there and stuff.
Are we going to be using the copper washers?
No, don't have any. And then this plug has to be in there. Otherwise, if that plug's open, then you get an air leak. Because a pump is going to pump whatever pump can do. It'll pump air, it'll pump fluid, it doesn't care. After it cares. All right, so goes up into the oil passages here, up to here, into this hole right here. Okay. Then it goes into the
Constant displacement pump.
constant displacement. Why is it constant displacement?
Because it pushes the same amount
of volume for rotation.
For rotation. All right, so it's going to go around the outside into this hole here. From this hole, you can see it's kind of got a passage. It goes up through here, up to this little area, through here. So really it's going to come up through here. And the inside of the screen, be a screen housing, okay? Inside the screen, outside, into here. And you guys need to figure this out. You don't have to remember this right now, but you have an oral on doing this, on the oral passage. This is what I want you guys to know. And really, I'm just kind of sitting here, it's not like I've got this memorized. I'm just kind of looking, I go, well, it's just obvious. It comes here, out the screen. And it's going to go in this way, and then where does it go from there? It's helpful to have a little flashlight. You go, where does it go? Right? I can see it goes in there, and then it's going to come up through here. And you can have right here an oil pressure pickup tube. It will go to your instruments. Some of these other holes, like this big hole and this big hole here, these are hoses that are going to go out to the oil cooler. So from here, go to the oil cooler back into this way, and then back up. And then also, I don't have one, but it gets a little more complicated. There's an adapter that can go over this that has vernitherms and such that can actually control the temperature of the oil. So this is a vernitherm. And when they're cold, they contract, and when they're hot, they expand. And so as the oil heats up, it will heat up and block off that passage and force. Remember, there's an adapter here now, so it's not like the screen is there anymore. The screen goes out. Yeah, like I said, you got to do a whole different adapter, but follow me through what it is. In theory, so vernitherm expands, it plugs off a hole, it doesn't allow oil to go one way, and it forces it all to go through the oil cooler. And then when it gets cold, this will shrink back up, and it's easier to go the other way and not through the oil cooler. So that way you can adjust your temperature. So what else can I tell you?
How about an oil pressure relief valve? That's gonna be one of those.
All right, so oil pressure relief valve. Well, we haven't got to that yet. So anyway, there's various passages you can do that. Then it's going to work its way to this passage here. That's the important one. So you can see it just comes off of here. Comes out of this hole right here. So right through the screen, through here, that way, through here. Actually, that's where the oil pressure goes. And out this right here. So once it goes out of that, it's going to head off into the main oil galleries of the crankcase. So. Here's the hole, right? I'll look at that right. From this hole to that hole. Okay, and that hole right there is the right-hand oil gallery. So on this particular engine, kind of see it right here. So that's a pressure tube, and of course down here there's a plug that has to go in here, like in the plug. So now this contains all the oil pressure. So if we turn it around, oil pressure is going to come and it's going to spray by pressure because it's this tube right inside here, right here. Okay, so this is drilled down into that. So pressure oil for the camshaft right here, pressure oil camshaft, pressure oil. And then if you look in there, you can see some holes drilled in these tappet bores, and they go diagonal down into the oil gallery. So you have pressure oil here, 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 and here. Now you guys don't have pressure oil on the 0290Ds. There's a little trough there. So there's no gallery on, well, there's a gallery, but it's just not drilled into the tappet bores. So you have a little trough. And oil splashes up and it gets in that little trough and then it just drips. It goes down the push rod tubes. But back to this one. So what do we got here? Oh, we got the camshaft going, we got that. Okay, so then we got up here, same thing. Holes here, here, and here. This is different. So these are also drilled up into the oil gallery, right? So pressure oil is going to feed into this bearing. And as we talked about, so the pressure oil is going to surround this bearing, and it's going to leak into here. Or not leak, it's pressure fed into here. And that has a passage that goes to here. Goes around the sludge tube on the older crankshafts. The newer ones just have a stainless steel tube that just goes right into here. And you can actually see it where the sludge tube is. You just look at it and there's a little tiny stainless steel tube. You'll never take those out. They don't go back in. So it's going to feed it to this, and then the oil is going to come out of that hole. So into this one, out of that one, pressure oil on the connecting rod sprays and splashes all over the place. So this one is going to feed two centers. This one is going to feed, that one's going to feed up there. Now we've got this other hole right here. All right, so these two right here, if it's a constant speed propeller, yep. So it's a tube in here that goes from one end to the other, but it's open in the middle. So we have these right here, this pressure phase oil into here. Well, that oil, yeah, they make this stuff so heavy. What side do I want? This side. Right there, we have a high pressure oil fitting that came off of the governor, the prop governor. That's one of the bad things about Lycoming. There is an airworthiness directive. These aluminum fittings break. So they want them to be steel with a line that is steel, braided steel that is clamped in very specific spots. That feeds directly to that hole. So that's your high pressure governor going to the propeller. You don't want to remember this for next class. So where did I go here? The crankshaft. So that's going to feed to this. See how it's got that annulus, that cutout right there? Okay, so that matches with that, like so. So this part of the bearing has got the high pressure governor. This part and this part have the low pressure oil pump.
Oh.
So now you have to think about this. As this bearing wears out, and I have, let's say, 200 psi of governor pressure here, it's going to start leaking out this way, and you start losing control of the propeller. So there is a test with Lycoming where you can put a differential compression tester up here and put pressure air in and see how much it is a hole.
Huh.
So there's a leakage.
And you can get it up to 200 psi with the air?
No, but it's calibrated to 80, so you can put it like at 80 and it'll tell you.
Oh.
If you can hold 80 over 80, then this bearing is good. If you got
Okay.
like 20 over, I don't remember the numbers, but anyway, that's what it is. All right, so this particular case, unlike yours, you gotta think about that. We have all this pressure oil, and you guys only have one pressure gallery on one side. But we gotta feed the tappets. So we gotta get oil to the other side. So kind of look around. And
Kevin, if you're losing pressure to the pretty pitch propeller, will you also run low oil pressure on the engine oil?
No, because let's say the oil pump's working great, the
Yes.
governor's not, or there's slippage to the governor system,
Got it.
then you'll lose pressure there, but the rest will be happy. All right, so on this one, walnut down here. We've got, and I believe it's this hole down here. But we gotta work our way over to here, because we got another oil gallery right through here, because you gotta pressure feed these. Right, so you have the right and the left, so this is the left gallery. So that's just gonna come off of the case and work its way over here. And then back to this one here, I believe it is. This hole here, which comes off of that little dowel, which, yeah, is plumbed into, you can see it right here, it's plumbed down into there. So through here to the gallery, up here, through that dowel, into the other case, down in, feeds, pressure feeds that gallery, which pressure feeds the tappets. All of them so far?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, once we get to the tappets, brought these in. I saw them laying around, but I should bring these in.
Uh-oh.
What?
Computer's died.
This has got bored too. That bored my computer. Tappets.
Hydraulic? No.
Hydraulic tappets. Off of
Like going? Continental.
Continental, big bore Continentals. You can pull them out. So this is the part that rides against the camshaft. Ooh, let me ask you this. $1 million question. Intake or exhaust?
Intake.
Why? Because you had 50 feet shot?
Yeah.
Isn't the black ring small?
Listen to her. It's got the small black ring. So they're not local. They're not the high flow. They're local.
That's
Smart
right.
girl. So we don't take those apart out in the field. Just don't need to. But we'll talk about light coming.
How do you pull them out, Kevin? With like a pick or something? You pick, it's like a,
Oh, I actually have, automotive, they make it's like a reverse plier. You squeeze it and they open up.
yes.
You just reach in there, grab and pull them out, or pick works fine. These ones here, this is actually out of a Continental, I'm pretty sure. You are not, I'm going to stand corrected, 78290, that's left on me. You do not use a magnet on these. So they're installed like that, and have that little cup. So just use a piece of 040 safety wire, which is a tiny bend, stick it in there, pull the cup out, and then you use the same safety wire, reach in there and pull this out, pull out the hydraulic unit. So what's happening in there is we have the hydraulic tappets in there, and so the pressure oil is going to come into here, that little hole right there, and then it's going to fill that up. And then I showed you the picture earlier where it actually comes in here, and that little ball is in there, and then it pumps this up. These are a match set. There's a trick to it. So to get them apart, you have to push and twist, unscrew them. Even though it's a little cylinder, it's this little spring catches in there.
Huh.
And then they put them back together. It's like, they're hard now because that little ball needs to be pressed. But you put it together, you twist and it locks in. Push, untwist. And a towel.
I was listening to that for like 30 seconds.
What's that?
I said he was trying to get my attention. He was kind of tapping the taps together. I heard this like,
Oh.
what's that? Sounds like someone's got a sticky lifter.
All right. So there they are. You can see this one's pretty good. It's got a little ball, good ball in it. And then there's the hydraulic socket. That's called the socket. You'll notice there's a cup end and a flat end. I want to say that when so IA renewal, they showed an NTSB accident where somebody put it with the round part like that, and it caused the airplane to crash.
Oh, yeah.
I'm shocked. I would have thought it would have kind of worked, but it crashed. I think it killed people. You know, it just goes back to, gotta be careful. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it.
Yeah, read the instructions.
Even then, some of you guys have been really good. You're like bringing stuff to me, and you're like, okay, I've read the directions, and this actually doesn't make sense. I'm like, yeah, you're right, it doesn't. Just like the whole string thing. Run the string on the inside and outside of the bolt holes. Well, they don't say you got to keep it on one side, really, but, you know, just little things like that. So, all right. Goes through the hydraulic unit, into the push rod, through the push rod. There's the push rod. Should be able to see some light. I held it just right.
No. Actually goes through the center.
I can see it. So I always, when I build an engine, pull them up like that,
Yeah.
look inside, roll them on a flat plate, make sure they're not warped. So it goes through the pressure oil out of that as it bleeds down, or even those lifters. As they bleed down, it runs through here, goes to I was in the middle of grabbing other rocker arms. So these particular rocker arms, the ones you have on the 290s, it doesn't obviously go to the inside. It drips down the outside, and then it drips into that little hole. Into the hole and lubricates here. And then whatever dribbles down gets over here, and then that's pathetically how, because it's sitting this way, dribbles down, and that's how that gets lubricated. On both Continental and Lycoming that have the pressure oil, so it comes through here, and then you don't have an adjustment socket. It's all part, the rocker arm has a drilled center through it, so it'll be drilled, and you'll have pressure feed into here, and then it'll either have a hole on this end, which dribbles down to here, or on this end, which dribbles out, which is kind of weird. Well, Continental, you have to remember that it faces this way, so you put the hole up here, and it dribbles down this way. Lycoming goes this way, Continental goes that way. They have different oiling patterns. So that's kind of running you through the whole oil system. It's not hard. Oil pressure relief. All right, so oil pressure relief is nothing more than, you know this. Lycoming uses a ball and a spring, right? So just like I showed you in the picture up here, Continental does the same thing. They just don't use a ball. They just use a cup right there. And a spring. Actually, it's over here. What's that?
No magnets on that ball. When you pull things
I wouldn't, but Lycoming is not specific about it. The only thing they're super specific about is no magnets on that thing. Yeah. So I used to, whenever I overhauled engine, these are really cheap. I think it's a 1029 Bravo is the part number. I always get a new one and I take this home to my kids. So I had like a whole bag full of them. Kind of how I kept track. I like how many engines Daddy's built.
Isn't there a little like hole in that hydraulic tappet?
Yep.
If it's magnetized, it doesn't seat properly?
That's the one. They're so adamant about Lycoming is do not use a magnet to get those out. So yeah, so the ball, when pressure exceeds its predetermined limit that you have set, then the ball will open up, and then and oil dribbles out of that little hole right there.
Huh?
Turns to the sump.
Circle of life.
It is. All right, how do we adjust the oil pressure on Lycoming?
washer.
Oh, yeah.
Take this out and stack in some 1/4-inch washers.
Oh,
The book tells you what the maximum amount is. Get it done with spring. Newer Lycomings, you actually just have a nut out here you can turn. A lot of the Continentals, especially the big bores, you just reach in the back and there's a nut. It's easy, except you got to do it and then run it and see what it did.
Gotta do it again.
Yeah, and then shut down because
Undo it.
it's not so fun doing it while the engine's running. I mean, you can if you want, but it adds a level of, hey, that was fun.
Your own pressure gauge to the oil line to kind of bypass the instrument.
I never have, no, because, well,
Just
I've thought about it a million times. I'm like, yeah, that'd be a great thing to have, a calibrated gauge and tee it in, but
my airplane has a very low oil pressure reading, and the prior owner said it was a problem. He and his mechanic were chasing it for a long time. They couldn't seem to solve it.
yeah,
I was thinking, well, maybe just a bad gauge. I wonder if they-
that's my first thought. I wouldn't trust the gauge because it's a, 1960,
57.
57 with an original gauge.
Yes, sir.
So 50,
70 years old.
I'll be 60, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 60 years old. 64.
I think 64 is young
Yeah. It is, unless you're an oil temp or pressure gauge. Then it's rather old. So one word, JPI 930.
Yes.
That would solve your problem.
Yes.
Or it would confirm your problem. And then you'd say, well, I just spent all my money on a gauge and I can't afford to fix it. That is one of the reasons why I am installing a new pressure gauge, the JPI 930 in my aircraft, because I'm not happy with my oil pressure on my airplane. And it only has less than 400 hours since major on it. I forget. And I don't like it. It's when I got it, it was at the bottom of the green arc. And I flew it all, but it stayed there. It never went out, but it's right at the bottom. I don't like that. If you got a green arc, guess what? I want it right there in the middle. I'd a little dial caliper and I'm measuring, where's exactly the middle. I want it in the middle. And I do notice in my plane that it is temperature sensitive. So if my outside air temperature's freezing or below, it's a little over past half. If I'm flying around the valley in Bakersfield and it's 100 degrees outside, it's right at the bottom. And I've adjusted the screw all the way in and it just didn't seem to matter. Which tells me that I could have, and this is not uncommon, that any sort of leakage past the relief valve will cause low oil pressure. And that's very common, very common. A weak spring, you can turn this in all you want, but if the spring is really weak, some of these springs are very lightweight. Is it working? What's up with that one? So first thing I do is the gauge correct? If the gauge is correct, the next thing I do is I pull the relief valve apart and I go in there and I had special little tools. Lycoming's not a problem because you use that ball. But boy, you get a little piece of safety wire stuck in there, and hard to believe I've seen some of you guys the way you safety wire inside of an engine. I'm like, it's coming apart. You guys are so quiet now. I know. It's just when you've done this and you see what happens, you're a little more careful because it sucks when it happens to you. You're the one that works so hard to build an engine, but one little thing like that, and it's like your engine's crap. Yeah, or a little piece of walnut gets in there or something. But it does. It gets in there and kind of sticks, believe it or not. Because you got aluminum and steel, and something presses it in there, and it just wants to stay. Especially small Continentals. You can see how this is piloted right there. Right? Like the Lycoming just has the ball, and so it'll find its seat. But this is piloted. And so if you, which means that you have to think about it's running like a piston inside of the cylinder. It's got a sleeve, and if that, or just like a valve, poppet valve, right? If your guide is misaligned with your seat, then it's going to like leak right here, and it's exactly what that looks like in there, but it's just a little bit opposite, right? It's just sealing on this part, and I've seen that a lot where I will actually take it apart, and I'll do the same thing I do with valves. It's just instead of this way, it's this way. And I'll put a little bit of lapping compound, and I'll stick it in there, and I got a little stick that would go in there, and I'd lap it and pull it out and go, well, look at that. It's seating all the way around here, but only halfway inside of this right here. Well, no wonder you got low oil pressure. And then I had a little tool that would go in there that would just kind of clean it up just a little bit, and then go in and lap it again and say, okay, try it now. Like, whoa, it's really high now. So, it's just something that small. They were thinking, man, I'm going to need an overhaul, and my bearings are too fat, and only one time my whole career did I really ever have somebody bring in an airplane. It was like, man, I just got low oil pressure, Kevin. It's just been getting worse and worse. And, we checked everything, and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty low. We took it apart, and I measured, it was a Lycoming 4-cylinder. I measured the rear main, and it went from standard to like M10. In wear. It was huge back there. So that was a legitimate one. Other than that, no. So, you just got to watch that stuff, tips and tricks. So like on my plane, I'll check my gauge, and after that, I'm going to take this apart and order a new spring. Be my very next thing, and make sure that it's lapped in there. Although on a 470s, 520s, it's down low all the way in the back next to the firewall, so it's kind of hard. But, all right, want to write some stuff? You guys are getting off easy tonight. Although you don't ever have to write anything. One student complained, and he's not here. in this class. But I said, well, you don't have to write anything. He's like, oh, really? I thought you were going to check my notebook. I don't freaking care. Adult class. All right.
You're gonna give us a notebook grade?
If I did anything, I'd give you a haircut grade.
I'd probably get,
Full letter grade.
I'd get like a D.
You're pretty optimistic.
I don't think it's that bad.
Did you shampoo and condition?
I just shampooed.
Oh, look at that. Did Kelly say anything?
No!
Oh, come on.
I know.
Oh. All right. So there are several different kinds of oil sump systems. And the one I just went over would be the wet sump. That's the most common and the easiest one to actually start with. So the wet sump. And guess what? The sump is?
Wet.
It's wet. What's it wet with?
Oil.
Hopefully. Most typical in opposed engines. And I got it.
Depends where you get it.
All right. That was really off topic, so feel free to send in your comments too, let me know. Should Kevin get a new car? All right. So the wet sump is most typical, so it just look like. Has an oil sump and oil sump. We don't really call it oil pan, we call it an oil sump. But if you called it an oil pan, I'd know what you're talking about. Just don't call it I don't have a piston up here. Don't pick up a piston and call this a piston head. That for some reason, that's just like my one thing. Probably because if you go back in our storeroom where somebody didn't know what they're doing, wrote piston heads. And I'm like, there's a whole box of piston heads. Well, the rest of the piston is in there too. So,
Would you call the piston a plunger?
yeah, maybe. Oil sump on the bottom. Oil sump on the bottom of the engine. Boy, your test is really going to be a hard one. I'm gonna get through this. All right, so the oil pump sucks oil from the sump. Delivers to engine. Delivers oil to engine. This is very simplistic. And all oil is drained back to sump. Most all. Some of it will get burned. He's correct. Most of it will get burned. Or no, what? Not most of it. Most of it returns. Some of it would get burned in the cylinders, and a little bit of it may go out the breather. All right. Yes. So that is a wet sump. We also have dry sump engines. A dry sump. So you're going to find that in most radial engines, if not all. Most, all, probably all radial engines. Well, why? Because what's on the bottom of the engine?
Cylinders.
Yeah, you got it. A couple cylinders. So I guess we could take the cylinders off.
Yeah.
If you took off 2, it'd still be an odd number.
Yeah.
Most all radial engines. Inverted engines.
Oh, yeah.
Like that inverted inline 6.
Inline 6, yeah, inverted engines. And some opposed. Some opposed engines. For example, the Bonanza tend to do that. Our Bonanza, our V-tail out there, it has one on there. Does yours have a dry sump?
I'm a wet sump. I'll go for 70G.
I'm a
It's
wet
sump.
Are you one?
It's a wet sump. It's
Is it really?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And they did that in some Bonanzas. And the reason, well, Bonanzas. In the opposed, and this is only applies to the opposed, they did that because due to clearance issues,
I've heard that the E225 engine is the dry sump version of Bonanza.
Uh-huh.
So, when did the Ford- I think it went wet.
Yeah, because I think they just moved it and had the sump way in the back. It's only like that thick, all the way down to the last little bit, then it goes back down. Due to clearance issues with sump and nose wheel. So in some aircraft, especially retractable, where the nose wheel comes up, there's just not enough room for an oil sump there, so they'll make it a dry sump. Let me see. So I pretty much went through the operation, I think, of the wet sump, and hopefully that was explanatory. I think it's a rather simple system, and something you're going to have to get used to, especially to get through Aero 312 and 313. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to be able to take something like this, and this is the most simplistic version of anything you're going to work with, without any instruction from me or really even the book. And you should be able to do this and just go, all right, how does this work? Yeah. Right? And you have to be able to take a little flashlight and just start with, well, I guess it's got to suck the stuff up from the sump somehow. How's it going to do it? You know, and you may have a missing piece. You're like, ask me, well, how does it get from the sump to here? Because obviously the pump is sucking it from this hole here. Where does that go? You know, and I explain, oh yeah, there's a pickup tube that's missing. Oh, got it. From there, you got to be able to just start taking a flashlight, a little bit of air if you have to, and just start looking around, because it's not like this was some secret how they built it. They had to use drills, right? Everything is drilled on here. It's not like they molded it and go, oh, lucky there's a hole there. Sometimes you'll see something like, why is this hole up here? Well, might as well. They had to put that there because they ran a drill bit, it's called a drill, going all the way through to here. And they stopped right here. And then they had to put this hole going down that way. So everything has a passage. So if you look, you'll find every single passage. They're not hidden. I mean, they can be, but how does it get there? How does it get out? Oh, there's one thing I did forget. Let's say it should have been.
Piston collector?
This is actually missing something. Usually there's a little tiny hole here and a little tiny hole here.
Oh.
And it's very odd that this one's missing it.
Too simplistic.
Okay, this one's just different. Yours does. This one's the other way around. But I think you guys have little holes right here. And the reason why is because you'll find an oil passage from the pump through here up these little tiny holes. And I'll ask you what do those little tiny holes do.
They do.
For the gears?
Oh, yeah, the gears.
Pressure oils the shaft. Goes into the shaft and goes outside in. This engine does it the other way. So if you look right here, there's a hole drilled
Inside.
this way.
Yeah, I see.
So it's drilled from right here, from this bearing, straight down like that.
Oh, yeah.
You might even see the light in there.
You see it, yeah.
So pressure oils, so everything's got to get oiled. So I said, well, how does that get oiled? How does that get oiled? Kind of look through.
That pad that was for the I think it was for the fuel pump, or you're talking about where they drilled through to get to the
Here.
other side? Yeah, is that just a superfluous hole on top that just doesn't, it just kind of...
Not necessarily. What do they? I think up here we put the oil pressure relief.
Okay.
Or the bypass up here.
Okay.
So a lot of times these are plugged if you don't have an oil cooler.
Yeah, there's a bunch of...
What's this hole for?
That oil return?
It's completely see-through.
Completely see-through. There's a start and the end right there.
Weight reduction.
To get it from one top to the bottom.
Stud.
Stud and the bolt tube.
Hang it? As an ornament?
Weight
Now
reduction.
let's think about your gears in the back of your engine.
Okay.
So you got a cam gear,
Uh-huh.
got a crank gear,
Uh-huh.
got an idler gear,
Uh-huh.
got an idler gear over here.
Uh-huh.
Are these two idler gears the same?
No, there's a lobe.
There's a lobe.
Oh.
This one.
So it's a shaft that goes...
So there's a lobe, a cam lobe.
Oh.
It pushes on a shaft. It is going to go like this.
What does that do?
What is that for?
Fuel pump.
Oh.
Oh,
Shit.
okay.
That's cool.
Now you only need a fuel pump if you've got fuel injected or pressure carb or a low wing aircraft. So if you've got a high wing aircraft that's gravity fed into a carburetor, you don't need that.
Okay.
So I took it out because one of the dangers is if that plunger is sticking up a little bit and you try and put it on, that cam gear, you'll blow out something. So I took them all out because we don't need them. All right. Operation of a dry sump. Operation of a dry sump. Dry sump. Engine. Engine. All right. Well, you got to have an oil tank, first of all. Because if it's a dry sump, it means that you don't keep hardly any oil in the engine. It goes to a tank, and the tank is usually mounted on the firewall or somewhere on the motor mount, but it's separate from the engine, and it's connected to the engine with hoses. So,
Typically use more oil? Carry more oil?
yeah, they usually do. Oil tank is mounted on firewall. I'll just say firewall. That's one for each engine. One for each engine.
You
The
ever see bigger engines with two?
yeah. Outlet is near the bottom for obvious reasons. Near the bottom or lowest point. Now it may be like this. So, oil tank. This would be an awesome oil tank right there. All right, so here's my oil tank. Mounted the firewall. There we go. Got a little cap on it. Ooh, that's looking pretty good right there. All right, so we have an outlet. It may look like this. One outlet does that, and another outlet may be down here. So that our oil, what color oil should be green? If the oil gets to this part right here, and we start losing our oil, and now we're sucking air, we still have oil going this way.
So there's always one going to be at the very bottom.
Right. So this one's going to go to engine. Well, what the hell you think this one's going to go to?
The prop.
Prop. Yep. You got it.
The prop is more important
Yep.
than your engine.
To prop feather. To the prop feather control, so to speak.
Why don't they just have them in the same spot?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because you're flying along, and let's just say that the person who did your annual inspection wasn't somebody who was into hoses. And I should have brought in the oil hose off my airplane. It's like not going back on. I was very finicky about hoses.
Is this a personal story?
This is a personal story. I'm very finicky about hoses. I had somebody with the Cherokee something or another, I don't know, they had picked it up at one of these, bought it on an airport at derelict on the airport, and had an A&P come out and made all new hoses to put on because they were all rotten. And they had flew it as far as Franklin out there, and we got a call saying, hey, I was lost power, I barely made it, I glided into Franklin, here I am, there's nobody on the airport, you guys are the closest in Clarksburg, can you come out and look at my engine, the thing won't run. So I go out there, me and another mechanic, and we're like, won't run, so we took the top of the manifold off, for the fuel injection manifold, and it's just packed full of rubber from the new hoses.
Oh.
So, we unpacked all that stuff, cleaned it all out, put it together, started up. Hey, it works. Okay, it works, but when you make hoses, there's a metal part that, I'm looking at you because that goes in a hose, but it's pretty sharp. And if you're not careful, you end up scraping off a little bit of rubber. Or you can even make a little flapper in there that acts like a check valve. Mm-hmm. So, and this is coming from people who made hoses. Explain to me, this is why, and so when you go to a hose shop and they're TSO'd and certified, they bore scope them, they run brushes through them. I mean, they pressure test them. But out in the field, we just got the tools. I'm an A&P mechanic, put them all together, and that's what happened. So, we get it all cleaned up and tell the guy, hey, man, this is not a good thing. That's, I don't recommend you fly it. Well, He's in charge, not me, you know, because you can sign off for what you did. Remove the top of the fuel manifold, cleaned out debris, reassembled. I did it. I did that to an airworthy fashion. Pilot decided he was going to fly it to us, which is, I don't know, in that plane just 5 minutes away. Flew to us, and as he pulls in, he's like, man, I was starting to lose power again. Pull the top off, more stuff. I mean, it's just making it, you know. And so we clean it all out. You know, we recommend you throw all these hoses away. We go to Sky Ranch, get all new hoses, and that's a lot of money. You know, I bought a fuel hose that long; it was like $500. Yeah.
That's pocket change.
Yeah.
What kind of rubber is it? Is it just because we're fancy? Is that why?
No, I bought the. I don't want to get into hoses, but there's different quality of hoses, and so I bought they're the brown Teflon. They're called lifetime hoses, but they'll last a long, long time. They're very expensive and have a fire sleeve on them. But you can kind of go down in quality. These were the lowest. But you know, he's like, no, I'm fine. And he took off again. I think he made it as far as executive, which is another 10 minutes away, and they packed up again. It's like, nah, we're done. But you know, that just it scared me. You know,
From MCC to SAC.
no, from Clarksburg to
Okay.
to executive, which is the same as from here to executive.
Oh, okay.
Probably, actually, no, it's closer because we were we were inside the Class D.
So we're talking.
So that's a 5 mile radius, right? So within 5 miles. So he was losing power again. So whatever.
And that was after new hoses?
I don't know what he did after that. I think we were done with him. It's like you can find another mechanic at that point. But anyway, so you know, you learn from stuff like that. So, and having worked around people who worked in hose shops who come up to you and go, man, I wouldn't make a hose, man. If you knew how we really make them when they're TSO'd and they come with the TSO stamp on them and a band, he goes, I wouldn't be making them out in the field. So you'll never catch me making a hose out in the field. If I can't afford to buy a new hose, then I'm just not, I'll get rid of my airplane. But anyway, so I guess that story was about what happened. So you have some sort of hose that was manufactured, because you got a wet sump. Now you got hoses going from the engine to the sump back. You blow out a hose right here. There's my grain. Right? Because it could happen. And I've seen people, they just run their hoses until that happens. Oh, I guess it's time for a new hose, you think? All right, so you run all the oil out. And if it's a twin, now you're in big trouble because on that side, that engine just lost oil pressure and it's getting ready to seize up. So you happen to look over as you're reaching for your beer and go, what the heck's going on for that? You notice your oil pressure is just coming down to nothing. Oil temp is kind of going because it's really air temp now. And you start, it's squealing a little bit. You're losing that engine. And the last thing you want now is for that engine you got to shut it down, or if it shuts down on its own, you got the prop sticking like this out there. Now you've got big time yaw, and so you need to feather it. So you want to make sure that there's at least enough oil to feather the propeller. So you can feather the prop, then you're going to be fine. Now, in theory, on a twin, when you lose oil pressure, it should feather anyway, but this is the system, so I don't talk about it. Yeah, they're going to do it backwards.
Single feather, lots of oil pressure?
Well, actually, that is kind of a break time, isn't it?